0400 hours, Black Sea, 20 miles off the Crimean coast. Rain lashes against the steel hull of the lead frigate, driven by a freezing wind that howls through the radar masts. Heavy waves crash over the bow, sending sheets of white spray flying into the darkness. On the bridge, red combat lights bathe the crew in a sinister glow as officers hover over glowing tactical displays. The vessel pitches and rolls in the storm, a gray ghost hidden within the tempest. A deep, rhythmic thrumming vibrates through the deck plates, signaling the readiness of the propulsion systems. A coded signal pulses across the fleet network. The weapons officer inserts a physical key into the launch console and twists it. A heavy metallic clank resonates through the ship's spine as the armored covers of the vertical launch silos slide open. The sound of the storm is suddenly muffled by the high-pitched whine of hydraulic systems pressurizing. Fire erupts. Compressed air ejects the first cylinder from the deck. The rocket motor ignites with a blinding flash that turns the rainy night into instantaneous day. The massive cruise missile roars upward, trailing a tail of searing white exhaust. It hangs vertically for a split second, defying gravity, before its guidance fins snap open. The weapon tilts, levels off, and accelerates toward the coastline, skimming dangerously low over the water. The deck shudders violently as the second missile launches. Then the third. The ocean surface boils as destroyers, frigates, and surfaced submarines across the entire formation unleash their payloads. The sky tears apart. 450 distinct smoke trails sear the stormy atmosphere. The deafening roar of hundreds of booster engines drowns out the natural thunder. The air vibrates with raw mechanical power, shaking the raindrops into mist. On the nearby peninsula, mobile ground launchers elevate their heavy canisters. The ground quakes as they ripple fire into the low clouds. The horizon burns orange, a solid wall of rising fire that illuminates the churning black water for miles. The heat from the launches instantly evaporates the rain, creating clouds of hissing steam that mix with the acrid smoke of rocket fuel. The admiral stands rigid on the bridge, watching the telemetry screen. The hundreds of green dots merge into a single solid wave of destruction moving north. He barks a confirmation order into the handset. The missile swarm aligns on a programmed vector, dropping to wave-top height to evade radar detection. The launch decks smoke, charred by the intense heat. Empty canisters litter the ground batteries. The missiles disappear into the gloom, racing toward the mainland at subsonic speeds. The roar fades, replaced once again by the howling wind and the crashing waves. The fleet returns to the shadows of the storm, leaving only the smell of burnt propellant hanging heavy over the sea. 0405 hours, Coastal Air Defense Battery, Southern Ukraine. The storm intensifies, hammering the metal roofs of the command trailers. Large rotating radar dishes sweep the dark horizon, shedding water as they spin. Inside the cramped control unit, the air is stale and hot, smelling of ozone and coffee. Operators lean forward, their faces illuminated by the green glow of cathode ray tubes. The only sound is the steady hum of cooling fans and the distant rumble of thunder. A sudden electronic shriek cuts through the room. The main radar screen floods with contacts. One blinking dot becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. The display washes out in a sea of red warning indicators. The senior officer smashes his fist onto the alert button. The klaxon screams. Outside, hydraulic motors whine as the defense battery traverses. Four-barreled anti-aircraft cannons angle sharply toward the sea. The first wave hits the coastline. The sound arrives before the shapes, a tearing, high-pitched scream that vibrates in the chest. The cruise missiles skim 50 feet above the crashing surf, kicking up rooster tails of spray. They fly in a tight, lethal formation, moving faster than the eye can track. The ground batteries open fire. Twin streams of tracer rounds stitch the darkness, creating a lattice of burning lead in the sky. One missile takes a direct hit. It disintegrates in a brilliant orange fireball, showering the beach with burning aluminum. A second missile clips a telephone pole, cartwheeling into a sand dune and detonating with a ground-shaking thud. But the swarm is too thick. The remaining weapons adjust their flight paths. They bank hard, hugging the terrain contours, dropping into river valleys to mask their approach. The roar of hundreds of turbojet engines merges into a single continuous thunderclap. They streak over the defensive line, leaving the tracers snapping impotently at empty air. Trees bend and snap from the wake turbulence. Windows in coastal villages shatter inward as the pressure wave passes. The missiles accelerate, locking onto their inland vector. The officer in the trailer stares at the screen. The red swarm clears the defensive zone and spreads out. He grabs the radio handset, his knuckles white. He shouts the warning to the rear echelon, but the roar outside swallows his voice. The swarm disappears into the rain-soaked interior, hunting for steel. 0408 hours. Rural supply route north of Kherson. Thick black mud swallows the tracks of the lead infantry fighting vehicle. The engine roars, straining against the suction of the flooded road. Rain hammers the armor plating, washing away layers of dried earth to reveal the green steel beneath. 25 identical machines follow in a single file, their exhaust pipes belching blue-gray smoke into the cold morning air. The ground shakes rhythmically as over 300 tons of armor crawl through the bog. The convoy commander stands in the open hatch of the third vehicle. Rain drips from the rim of his helmet. He wipes sludge from his goggles and checks the tree line. The forest is dark, silent, and imposing. The only sound is the mechanical grinding of gears and the splash of heavy treads hitting deep puddles. The convoy creates a deep, muddy scar in the landscape. The radio static cuts out. A high-pitched, warbling tone erupts from the threat receiver inside the hull. The commander freezes. He looks south. The low clouds above the river valley glow with an unnatural strobe effect. The sound arrives a second later, not thunder, but a tearing screech that pierces the roar of the diesel engines. 3 dark shapes burst over the tree line at the horizon, then 3 more, then a dozen. They fly impossibly low, clipping the tops of the pine trees, sending branches and pine needles flying in their wake. The cruise missiles move with terrifying speed, gray blurs against the gray sky. "Contact! Air!" The commander screams into the throat mic. He slams his hand against the turret rim. The lead driver slams on the brakes. The 30-ton vehicle skids, its tracks locking up on the slick mud. It slides sideways, the rear end drifting off the road and into a ditch. The vehicle behind it cannot stop in time. It crashes into the lead unit's rear fender, metal screeching on metal. The collision jars the hull, knocking soldiers inside against the steel walls. The missile swarm spots the heat signatures. The engines of the armored column are hot, glowing bright white on the infrared guidance sensors of the incoming weapons. The lead missiles dip their noses. They do not fly straight, they hunt. The guidance fins snap, adjusting the trajectory. Drivers wrestle with steering yokes. Engines scream as gears are thrown into reverse. Tracks spin wildly, spraying geysers of mud and dirty water, but the vehicles are trapped in the mire. The convoy is a sitting duck, a rigid line of hot metal against a cold background. The first missile ignites its terminal booster. It accelerates, closing the distance in a heartbeat. The air pressure drops violently. The commander drops inside the turret and cranks the heavy steel hatch shut. He spins the locking wheel just as the shadow passes over him. The world outside turns white. 0410 hours. The stalled convoy. The roar of the incoming warheads drowns out the idling diesel engines. Soldiers inside the rear compartments grab support handles and brace their boots against the floor. The air pressure surrounding the column drops sharply, sucking the breath from the lungs of the troops exposed in the open hatches. The rain vaporizes before it hits the ground. The first missile slams into the roof of the lead armored vehicle. It does not bounce. It punches through the reactive armor tiles and detonates inside the hull. A 1,000-pound warhead ignites within the confined steel box. The vehicle ceases to exist. A sphere of superheated gas expands outward at supersonic speed. The heavy steel turret rips free from the chassis, shearing the traverse ring bolts like paper. It spins 50 feet into the air, trailing burning hydraulic fluid. The chassis buckles, the floor plating smashing upward into the roof. The blast wave turns the muddy road into a crater, instantly excavating tons of wet earth. The second missile strikes the number 2 vehicle a split second later. It hits the front slope, right above the driver's compartment. The explosion hammers the nose of the tank into the ground. The rear tracks lift 6 feet into the air. The vehicle flips completely over, crashing onto its roof with a bone-jarring crunch that snaps the suspension arms. The shockwave from the dual blasts rolls down the line. Windshields on the transport trucks shatter inward, showering drivers with cubes of safety glass. Heavy canvas covers on the rear trucks rip away, flapping wildly in the sudden gale. Trees lining the road snap in half, stripping the bark and leaves instantly. Burning debris rains down on the rest of the column. A jagged piece of track link, glowing red-hot, smashes into the viewing prism of the third vehicle. Clods of burning mud splatter against the sides of the remaining transports. The lead vehicle is now just a burning skeleton, a twisted pyre blocking the only way forward. Thick, oily black smoke billows upward, mixing with the rain, signaling the kill to the rest of the incoming swarm. 0412 hours, center of the convoy formation. The road is a slaughterhouse. Thick black smoke rolls down the line, obscuring vision. The heat from the burning lead vehicles distorts the air, making the tree line ripple like a mirage. The ground vibrates continuously, a ceaseless earthquake caused by the impacting ordnance. Rain sizzles as it hits the superheated armor of the surviving machines. The main body of the missile swarm arrives. They do not attack in single file. They strike simultaneously. 10 missiles dive from the gray clouds at once, spacing themselves perfectly along the trapped column. One missile slams into a fuel tanker positioned in the middle of the line. The impact ruptures the double-walled steel tank instantly. 3,000 gallons of diesel fuel vaporize. A second later, the detonator triggers. A massive fireball blooms outward, engulfing the two armored vehicles behind it. The fire sucks the oxygen from the air. The paint on the neighboring vehicles blisters and peels in milliseconds. Another missile strikes the turret roof of an infantry fighting vehicle. The shaped charge jet melts through the roof armor and penetrates the ammunition storage bin. The reaction is instantaneous. The propellant charges inside the 30mm shells ignite all at once. The vehicle shudders violently. The pressure inside spikes beyond structural limits. The jack-in-the-box effect occurs. The entire turret assembly, weighing several tons, blasts upward off the chassis. It spins through the smoke, wreathed in flames, and crashes upside down into the muddy ditch. A pillar of vertical fire jets from the open turret ring, reaching 20 feet into the air like a blowtorch. Debris flies everywhere. A heavy road wheel, sheared off by a near miss, cartwheels down the road and smashes into the grill of a supply truck. Burning metal shards rain down on the infantrymen cowering in the roadside ditches. The barrage is relentless. Explosions overlap, creating a wall of noise that physically hurts the ears. A troop carrier takes a hit to the tracks. The explosion snaps the heavy steel links. The track unspools like a dead snake. The vehicle slews sideways, exposing its thinner side armor. The next missile does not miss. It punches through the flank, sending a shockwave of overpressure through the troop compartment. The rear doors blow off their hinges, tumbling into the mud. Drivers panic. Engines rev to the red line. One tank tries to push the burning wreck in front of it off the road. Metal grinds on metal, sparks showering the mud. The dead weight does not move. The tank reverses, its treads churning the earth into a soup, digging itself deeper into the trap. The road is blocked. The air is filled with flying steel. The convoy burns. 04:15 hours, the roadside ditches. Chaos reigns. The rhythmic thumpings of autocannons cooking off in the fire mixes with the roar of burning fuel. The air is thick with the smell of scorched ozone, melting rubber, and raw copper blood. Visibility is near zero. The smoke hangs low, trapped by the heavy rain, creating a claustrophobic gray tunnel. Soldiers spill out of the rear hatches of the surviving vehicles. They do not run, they scramble. Boots slip on the oil-slicked mud. Men dive headfirst into the freezing water of the drainage ditches, seeking cover below the road grade. A missile strikes the road surface 10 feet from a cluster of infantry. It impacts the asphalt, sending a shockwave through the ground that lifts the men off their chests. Shrapnel tears through the air at supersonic speeds. Jagged fragments of the bomb casing shred the nearby bushes, stripping leaves and bark instantly. "Move! Move!" a sergeant screams. He grabs a young soldier by the drag handle of his vest and hauls him out of the mud. The soldier stumbles, his face coated in black soot. He clutches his rifle, but his hands shake so violently the weapon rattles against his belt. Above them, the air screams again. A missile clips the top of a troop transport. The warhead detonates late, sending a cone of blast overpressure downward. The shockwave hits the men in the ditch like a physical hammer. It knocks the wind out of them, pressing them into the sludge. Helmets fly off, mud sprays into eyes and mouths. A medic crawls through the muck, dragging a heavy aid bag. He reaches a wounded driver who was thrown clear of his burning truck. The driver's leg is twisted at an unnatural angle. The medic rips open a trauma packet, his fingers slick with rain and blood. He snaps a tourniquet around the limb and twists the windlass. The driver screams, a raw sound that cuts through the explosions. Debris continues to fall. A burning tire rolls off a rim and bounces down the embankment, hissing as it hits the water. A heavy steel hatch, blown off a tank 50 yards away, lands with a dull thud in the field behind them, burying itself halfway into the soft earth. The soldiers press themselves into the mud. They are small, soft targets in a world of breaking steel. The sky above them is still full of gray streaks. 04:18 hours. Rear guard position, southern edge of the kill zone. The smoke from the lead vehicles drifts south, blanketing the rear of the column in a choking gray fog. Rain mixes with the soot, painting the armor of the remaining tanks in greasy black streaks. Engines roar at maximum RPM. The ground churns into a soup of mud and diesel as the rear guard attempts to break contact. "Reverse! All units reverse!" the section leader screams into the radio. The driver of the last battle tank slams the gear lever back. He stomps on the accelerator. The 50-ton machine lurches backward. The tracks bite into the road surface, throwing massive clods of earth into the air. The tank picks up speed, moving blind. It slams into the front grille of the armored vehicle behind it. The collision crumples the lighter vehicle's nose like a soda can. Glass shatters. The tank climbs up the hood of the smaller transport, crushing the engine block under its weight before sliding off sideways. The tank slews into the tree line. The barrel of the main gun snags on a thick oak tree. The turret motor whines, fighting the resistance until the hydraulic pump bursts. The gun barrel bends. The tank stalls, wedged tight against the timber. The missile swarm detects the movement. The guidance systems lock onto the heat plumes of the revving engines. 3 missiles break from the formation overhead. They dive almost vertically. The first missile strikes the engine deck of the stuck tank. The blast punches through the rear louvers. The V12 diesel engine detonates. The heavy steel engine cover flips into the air, spinning like a coin and slices through the branches of the oak tree. Fire jets out of the rear exhaust ports, turning the tank into a blast furnace. The second missile targets a troop carrier attempting to navigate the muddy ditch. The carrier tilts dangerously as it tries to climb the embankment. The missile hits the exposed underbelly. The explosion lifts the 10-ton vehicle bodily into the air. It flips upside down and crashes into the deep mud, burying the roof hatches. The weight of the hull drives it deep into the mire, trapping the crew inside as the water rises. The remaining vehicles panic. A truck driver tries to turn around on the narrow road. The wheels lose traction. The truck jackknifes, blocking the only exit path. The driver kicks the door open and jumps, sprinting for the trees just as a shockwave flattens the canvas cargo cover. The retreat collapses. The rear of the column is now a tangled knot of burning wreckage and stuck steel. The road is sealed at both ends. 0422 hours, the drainage ditches. The bombardment slows, but a new enemy emerges. The ruptured hull of the central fuel tanker bleeds out. Thousands of gallons of diesel fuel gush onto the road surface, mixing with the rain and oil. The black liquid slicks the asphalt, pooling around the twisted wreckage before overflowing the road edge. It cascades down the muddy embankment like a waterfall, pouring directly into the trenches where the survivors huddle. A spark from a dying electrical system hits the fuel. The road ignites. A wall of orange flame races across the surface of the black water. The fire moves faster than a running man. It roars down the ditch, consuming the oxygen, turning the cold, wet shelter into an oven. The heat is instantaneous and blistering. "Fire! Move! Get up!" a lieutenant screams. Soldiers scramble. They abandon their prone positions. They claw at the steep, muddy banks, boots slipping on the slick clay. The fire chases them. It licks at their heels. The uniform of a straggler catches. He screams, thrashing in the mud, rolling frantically to smother the flames. 2 comrades grab his vest and haul him up the slope, their own gloves smoking from the contact. The heat cooks off ammunition left behind in the mud. Stray bullets pop and snap in the fire, whizzing randomly through the air. Grenades on discarded vests detonate, sending plumes of water and burning fuel spraying upward. The river of fire flows past the wreck of a troop carrier. The heat weakens the aluminum hull. The metal groans and sags. Inside, the remaining fuel in the carrier's own tanks reaches auto-ignition temperature. The vehicle explodes outward, not from a missile, but from the internal pressure. A wave of burning diesel sprays over the tree line, setting the wet pine branches alight. Smoke chokes the air. It is thick, black, and poisonous. Soldiers cough violently, wrapping wet scarves around their faces as they stumble into the forest. The orange glow creates dancing shadows among the trees. The ditch, once their only cover, is now a line of death. They are forced into the open woods, silhouettes against a backdrop of raging fire. 0430 hours. Edge of the tree line, the sky falls silent. The thunder of the missile engines fades into the distance, leaving a ringing emptiness in the ears. The rain continues to fall, hissing as it hits the miles of burning wreckage. The primary bombardment is over. The valley is no longer a road, it is a graveyard of iron. The unit commander crawls out from under a fallen pine tree. His uniform is torn, covered in mud and oil. Blood trickles from a cut on his forehead, mixing with the soot. He stumbles toward the remains of his command vehicle. The antenna mast is sheared off, hanging by a single wire. He grabs the handset. He squeezes the transmit key. "Command, this is Victor 1. Status report, over." Static. White noise hisses back at him. He switches frequencies. Any station, this is Victor 1. We are combat ineffective, requesting immediate medevac. Over. Nothing but the crackle of the burning convoy. He slams the handset against the side of the hull. He kicks the crushed door of the Jeep. He looks down the line, 26 vehicles, not one is moving. The turrets of the tanks are blown off. The trucks are twisted skeletons. A junior lieutenant stumbles out of the smoke, supporting a limping radio operator. The lieutenant's eyes are wide, scanning the trees. He grips his pistol, but there is nothing to shoot. The enemy was never there. It was just ghosts in the sky. Perimeter! The commander barks. His voice cracks, hoarse from the smoke. Set a perimeter! Gather the wounded! The survivors move slowly like sleepwalkers. They drag casualties into the cover of the woods. They strip magazines from the dead. They check weapons, but the discipline is broken. Men stare at the burning hulks of their machines, their mouths hanging open. The command structure has disintegrated. There is no platoon, no company. Just a handful of men standing in the rain, watching their battalion burn. The radio crackles once, a burst of interference, then dies completely. The battery fails. The commander drops the handset into the mud. 0500 hours. The devastation zone. Gray dawn breaks over the eastern ridge, casting a pale, sickly light onto the valley floor. The heavy rain tapers off to a freezing drizzle. The wind dies down, leaving the smoke to rise in straight black pillars that mark the grave of the column. The road no longer exists. It is a scar of churned earth, filled with water-filled craters and twisted metal. Survivors emerge from the tree line like ghosts. They are covered in mud, soot, and dried blood. They walk slowly among the wreckage, their boots crunching on shattered glass and spent shell casings. A soldier stops beside the inverted hull of a troop carrier. He reaches out and touches the scorched metal. It is still hot. He pulls his hand back. Medics set up a triage point in a muddy clearing. They work in silence. One medic cuts the boot off a wounded private. He pours antiseptic onto a shrapnel wound. The soldier grits his teeth and grips the grass, but he does not scream. He is too tired. A high-pitched mechanical whine cuts through the quiet. Heads turn upward. A small black surveillance drone descends from the clouds. It hovers 50 feet above the lead wreck. Its camera lens rotates, zooming in on the destruction. It pans down the line, recording the 26 burning hulks. It pauses over the crushed remains of the command vehicle, verifying the kill. The drone tilts forward and accelerates, buzzing over the heads of the survivors. It climbs higher, pulling back to capture the full scale of the disaster. From the air, the convoy looks like a broken spine. The black smoke merges with the gray clouds, hiding the dead from the morning sun. The drone disappears into the mist. The survivors are left alone in the ruins.